everybody to another episode of Pro Cuts with Rob Friedman, Mr. Flat Ground Pitching Ninja. Today we got Chicago White Sox pitcher Lucas Giolito with us. How are you, man?
How's it going?
I am doing well. Thank you very much for jumping in. I know you'd much rather be on a baseball field right now. Rob speaks your language better than I do, so Rob, get us started here today.
Yeah, before getting into pitching, one thing I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention is the whole protest stuff going on right now. And I noticed that you were vocal about it. I was just kind of wondered how you made the decision to be vocal and speak out about it. I saw some mention of Tim Anderson. I'm just curious as to what your feelings are.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up with my parents kind of having an emphasis on empathy, kindness, tolerance. Those are big morals in our house. So, seeing what's been going on, in my entire lifetime, going on in this country for like 400 years, it's always been something that I've paid attention to, and that I've, had feelings towards. Being in baseball, obviously baseball's a white dominated sport for sure. We've seen kind of like a decline in black players over the last X amount of years now. I never, and another thing is like all the like media training, social media training that we get as you come up through the minor leagues, get to the big leagues. It's don't be political, don't do this, don't do that. You want to keep it squeaky clean. You don't want to like polarize your fans, whatever it may be. So I always was like, I would look at guys like Sean Doolittle in the league, kind of outspoken, using their platform to express how they feel about certain things. And I would look up to that. But I was like, man, I don't know. I'm not established. I don't want to like get in trouble. I don't want to like make waves. I just want to like focus on baseball and do everything I can in that area. Well, when I saw the murder of George Floyd, when I saw what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, that's when I was like, all right, enough's enough here. I'm not just going to continue to do what I do and kind of take advantage of my privilege, take advantage of my platform, not taking advantage of my platform to not just show my feelings towards what's going on, my support of the Black community as obviously the fight continues. But after putting out what I put out, I was happy to see other guys, especially white guys in the MLB, starting to use their voices, and it's been promising. I'm feeling hopeful. It's the biggest civil rights movement, I think, in the history of the world going on right now. So hopefully some changes are coming.
Have you seen, so you grew up, you're 25, you grew up coming through travel ball era and showcase era. And today, actually, before this, I was watching some of the live casts of these games, since nobody's allowed to go out and watch them this year. And especially right now with everything that's on our mind, it's hard to not notice how white the field is. Did you notice any of that coming up back then, where the travel ball, the showcases, these things, they were leaving out lower income families and a lot of times minority communities?
Yeah, I mean, especially where I came from. I grew up in Santa Monica, California, playing travel ball in Los Angeles, west side of Los Angeles. Obviously, like a lot of fees, a lot of equipment, a lot of travel. I remember, waking up early on weekends and getting in the car and driving like 2 hours to go play like 3 games and then doing it the next day. I think that youth baseball, especially as you get into like very competitive youth baseball, it's very inaccessible for lower income families unless other families chip in. I've seen that, like financial aid programs and things like that. But yeah, I do believe that there's got to be a lot more work done in that area. Now, as I was in high school, I had the opportunity to play a couple times at the Urban Youth Academy in Compton, and I believe that's MLB run. Maybe not. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But that was a really cool experience because going out there and playing, like, you're seeing a lot more faces, not just white faces. And so I think baseball needs more of that. I know that MLB's got some programs, I think like RBI program maybe, that are supposed to help in that area, but to really
Let me
make
ask you.
changes. Yeah.
Well, let
Go
me
ahead.
ask you this, because you played at a really high level. You were really talented. You were obviously training hard. You were obviously being run around to some places to showcase. Looking back on it now, how much unnecessary money do you feel like was spent by maybe you or just kids around you, and like looking at it today? I mean, there's so much being sold. Like, you don't need to do
Oh yeah.
this, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. That's like my big piece of advice when I talk to kids in high school that are potential college prospects, draft prospects. Like, hey, you don't have to do every perfect game event, dude. Like that was kind of the approach my parents and I had when I was like 15, 16. Don't like do too many events, don't do too much. I think that I did one perfect game event, and then I did the Petco Park game, the All-American game or whatever it's called. We tried to avoid like all the showcases just because couple of reasons. One, I'm a pitcher and I didn't want to throw too much. It didn't end up mattering because it got Tommy John anyways. But two, you don't want to like overexpose yourself. Like if you're playing in high school and you're really good and you're just playing in high school, scouts are going to come. Like, they're going to hear about a kid throwing in the low 90s, mid 90s. You don't have to like go and play every single weekend and throw one inning at max effort and be like, oh, I hit 94.6 today. Oh, I hit 95.1 today. Like, if you're very, very good, scouts will find you. That's what they're there for. And, you'll get looked at by colleges, all that good stuff. I'd say definitely have more emphasis on like training and developing your craft as a player over just going and exposing yourself over and over and over again. Because like, if you go to a lot of those showcases, a lot of those events, like, you're bound to not do well at a certain one, and then boom, you might get like knocked off a couple ticks. So yeah,
It's almost like people are looking for excuses to not pick you high. They're looking for that flaw, and as soon as they see it, then it hurts you by being overexposed, it seems.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think that there's a healthy balance. Like, I think that those showcase type events definitely help a lot of players. But I remember in high school, going on like the Perfect Game website and various other things, and seeing those players that were going to like every single one that was available. And most of those guys that did that stuff, like, you don't see them in pro ball anymore or doing anything else.
Yeah, but that's how they became ranked number one.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter though. Like that, I remember being a 16-year-old kid and going and being like, oh, who's ranked here, who's ranked there. Like, that shit doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't. Like, what really matters is what big league front offices are looking for to complete their depth chart and their team. and what college you end up going to and developing your skills. Like, that's what matters.
Rob, I just want to say something in response to yours. I know I'm not supposed to be the guy that's talking here, but since kids are listening, and you mentioned like it is a lot of process of elimination in my dealing with coaches. Like, they see everything good, right? They hear everything good, and that's why they go watch the kid, because they get all the good stuff on the kid. So it's like a lot of times they're going out there like, okay, so why is this kid not committed if he's so good, right? What's wrong with him? And they are looking for kind of that piece that's missing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've seen. And the other thing I've seen, and it's almost like a structural issue, because I think you have parents that want the best for their kid, and especially parents that are pretty well off. They're going to buy their kid the best bat. They're going to put their kid on the best team, get the best glove, not spare no expense for showcases. And it creates a barrier to the people that don't have that. People have to take off work. And that's actually why I started Flatground, is to try to undo some of that. But it's tough, man, because the parents are doing it for the right reasons in their heart to help their kids, but it's creating an imbalance to me.
Lucas, can I ask you, building off of what he's saying there with your response, do you feel like, because a coach was telling me yesterday, that kids feel the pressure of how much money their parents are spending on them? And that, I mean, looking back on it, can you think of, those parents that maybe did put that pressure on them because they're taking off work, they're spending this much money to go here? Like, did you see any of that?
I don't know if I noticed that.
Yesterday was the first time I ever heard it, and I thought it was a really interesting point, actually.
Yeah,
when you talk about competitive anxiety, really, is what.
Yeah, that's a bit more than just like, oh man, I better get a couple hits here so that this college might send me a letter. Yeah, that is an interesting point. I don't think that I've ever really considered that either. The how it makes the actual kid feel, as we're talking like 15, 16-year-olds, kind of feeling responsible for,
I mean, I've seen it, I've heard it, right? I mean, parents spending thousands of dollars to take their kid somewhere and the kid goes 0 for 12,
Yeah. Yeah, I bet he doesn't feel very good about that, for sure.
Yeah, I had my kid puking in a dugout in Nashville. Didn't tell me, but before his start, because he had a stomach bug, and had everybody up there with guns, and then they put him away in the first inning because he's sick. And I could imagine somebody used up their vacation. You have parents that are using up the vacation, spending money they don't have to give their kids that chance, and then their kid gets sick. I'd say that put a lot of stress on them too, probably.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I said, my view on it is like, do the bare minimum. focus on your high school team, going to a state championship or something. It's a lot more fun anyways. And if you're really, really good, you're going to get invited to the big time stuff, area code and Under Armour game and Aflac game. Well, it's not, I don't think it's called the Aflac game anymore, but that's where the real fun is. Like, I remember going through that circuit, Team USA, that as well. But obviously it's like, you got to find that balance. That is an interesting point about like a kid kind of shouldering the pressure, financial pressure from their parents. I haven't really considered that.
You played on one of the all-time great starting rotations in high school history, I would think. It can't be much better than that. What was it like going out there with scouts? And it probably had to be rows deep watching every single one of your starts.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, something about like having a bunch of radar guns behind the fence, behind the backstop, like it gives you that extra adrenaline boost for sure. But we had a lot of fun with it. Max Freed, he actually transferred over just for senior year because his high school started running out of money and they had to cut their sports program completely. And he's like, well, there's no way I can't play baseball. So I was like, all right, come on over. Apply to Harvard Westlake. But yeah, we had some very interesting games. One of my highlights, because I ended up hurting my elbow my senior year, so I only made like 3-4 starts. But one of the highlights was in preseason, we went over to Las Vegas and we faced Bishop Gorman, where Joey Gallo was at school. And that was the most scouts I've ever seen, like at a high school game. I don't think I'll ever see that many ever again. It was like all the way, left field, right field, guys taking notes on like Joey. And then you had like obviously the backstop. That whole area is completely filled with scouts, probably hundreds. So the game was crazy too. I remember Max hit a home run that like bounced over the center field fence and like ricocheted back onto the field, and the umpire said that it was in play when it was clearly a home run. Joey actually pitched and he was throwing like upper 90s.
Wow.
I think it's like well known around baseball he has a cannon, and that like if he were to get on a mound right now, he'd probably be pumping 95 plus, even though he hasn't pitched in a while. Um, yeah, that was a cool experience overall. And then Jack was the one that ended up leading Harvard Westlake to the highest level, winning CIF championship, number one ranked team in the country. That was after me and Max were gone.
So we talked to, I'm sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Oh, no. You go.
Okay, so we talked to Leo Mazzoni recently, and he was talking about, I forget the percentage, maybe Rob, you remember, but it was over 50% of Tommy John surgeries these days are happening with kids under the age of 18, I believe was the statistic. And you had Tommy John surgery under the age of 18 also, correct? Or
Right after my 18th birthday.
okay, so
Yeah.
what do you think contributed to that? And what do you think maybe today you kind of see these high schoolers doing that maybe they don't need to be doing, that is more of an injury risk than a helpful exercise?
It's tough because like everything's becoming so specialized, and there's so much like science behind pitching now, and like achieving perfect mechanics and trying to increase velo. Like everyone's throwing harder. Obviously you have the drive line type of programs where you throw plyo care balls and heavy weighted baseballs and underweighted baseballs. At the end of the day, like any kind of overhand throwing at max effort, like you're putting yourself at risk for injury. When you start mixing in heavy weighted balls and underweighted balls, like you're putting yourself at more risk for injury. So it's kind of like the risk reward of, do I want to do all these programs and do all this stuff to continue to develop myself as a pitcher and build velocity, because everyone looks at velocity and you need to throw hard? Or do you want to kind of ease off of that and focus more on arm health, but now you might not be maximizing your body's potential as far as velocity? So it's like, I don't know, it's weird. I don't know. I didn't do any of the driveline stuff growing up. And then I did a few kind of like we kind of picked out a few exercises that I really liked, that I did a lot of as I was kind of making my adjustments with my arm action and everything. But since then, I haven't done any of that stuff anymore.
So when I was talking to Jesus Luzardo and he was talking about the surgery that he had his senior year, the Tommy John, he attributed it to the opposite of your schedule, where he felt like, to too many things looking back on it. He was just going. And what he feels like he did wrong in that was just not communicate to his coaches what he was doing with the other guys. It wasn't that any one coach was abusing him. It just was the lack of communication somewhere. But you weren't going everywhere, like you're saying. You were very, careful about that. And was there any specific reason that you got injured?
I was throwing 100 miles per hour, and I was like 17 years old. I had no muscle definition at all. I was like a lanky, um, just completely using all arm to throw. When I look at videos of my pitching mechanics from when I was in high school, I kind of cringe a little bit. Just like tall and fall, and I'd rip my hips and my arm would follow. And I was throwing very hard, much harder than I do now. So, it was pretty much a ticking time bomb. And I was also ripping curveballs as hard as I could at like 85 miles an hour. So
I got one more follow-up and then let Rob take over. What were you doing that you were throwing that hard with that body type at that time?
well, the body type was good, 6'6", big wingspan, and all that good stuff. I hadn't, first of all, like really gotten into like true arm care routine, like the physical therapy kind of stuff. I didn't do any of it. I didn't know I was supposed to. I didn't know, I was healthy my entire life up to that point. So I had never really gotten into it. I did a lot of the Jaeger program stuff, which I still do to this day. I love Alan. Uh, so I was long tossing a lot. A lot of days I would play catch. I was also throwing the ball as far as I could. And I think that helped build arm strength quickly. My velocity started jumping up probably, I always threw hard, but I started making huge jumps like sophomore, junior year, and especially junior to senior years, when I went from like being like low to mid 90s to like literally, I had games my senior year where I was sitting 96, 97. And it was like, how is this even happening? I remember like that preseason before my senior year, I would go out and have a game sitting 95, 96, next game, like sitting 96, 97, next game, sitting 96, 97, touching 98, next game, touch 99, next game, touch 100. And it was like, how is this happening? I don't know. It was just, everything was kind of syncing up. But at the same time, that's a lot to put on a 17-year-old arm. So I think that, Tommy Johns are going to continue to happen. They're going to continue to happen at a high rate, just because that's what everyone's striving for as a pitcher. You want to throw as hard as you can. It makes it easier to get guys out. And so, sorry, my wife's distracting me.
She can come on if she wants. I mean.
I lost my train of thought there
just about velo keep going up, and arm issues will continue to happen.
Yeah. So I my biggest thing, I guess my biggest two things we've kind of been talking about here are like, don't do too much. As far as like the showcase circuit and all that. And then also get into like arm care, whether you're going to a physical therapist or not. There's things that you can look up online, programs. I mean, you go on Instagram, you go on Twitter, you got arm care programs all over the place, exercises, the Jobs, the bands. That stuff's super important. That's the kind of stuff that I pretty much like live and breathe now as a professional pitcher. Doing on a 5-day work week, getting 2 to 3 solid days of arm care routine, different types of arm care routine. If you're a hard thrower, and especially if you're young, like start getting into that stuff is what I'd say.
How hard is it to do the trade-off between throwing as hard as you can, because that's going to get scouts' attention, and working on your craft? The idea that hitting your spots, getting outs is what matters in the long run. It matters where you're at right now. But you're going to get scouts' attention by maxing out, but you're redlining and putting things in danger. And then the flip side is, if you're too careful and take too much time off and then you max out, you're likely to also get injured because you're not staying in shape. So it's a tough balance, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is. The days of, just go and play and try and get guys out, they're kind of over now. It's all about velocity and how much this pitch moves, how much that pitch moves. Yeah, one thing about that is you post a lot of videos and you've helped a lot of kids with the flat ground, pitching ninja, uh, just kids working like an indoor facility, throwing off a turf mound and throwing a bullpen, and then they'll end up getting signed and play professional baseball or get looked at by colleges. It's like really cool to me, but at the same time, I don't know how these kids are throwing so hard on like indoor turf mounds, like throwing into a mat. It's it cracks me up a little bit because out here where I live, I go to a facility in Sacramento called OA, Optimum Athletes, and it's a great facility. They do implement a lot of that drive line type stuff, and they help out a lot of kids. And I'll go and throw bullpens off of like that throwdown mound in a batting cage, and I can't break like 91, 92. No chance. But you get me outside off a real mound wearing some cleats and with a batter in the box, and I'll get up to my normal velocity. I think it's cool that these kids now can just like create adrenaline from nothing just to throw the ball really hard.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say it's nuts. We had Luke Little on about a month ago, maybe something like that, who hit 105 with a pocket radar. He was sitting 101, 102 on an indoor mound. He's 6'9", giant kid.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy to me, man. Like for me, if I'm not facing hitters, I'm not in a game type scenario that adrenaline's going from all the factors of being in a game. Like I'm not going to treat. I can't do it. I can't just throw super hard in a bullpen. It's more about like feel and like how I want to feel things out of my hand. Trying to hit certain locations. It's just like completely different than the like bullpen style of a kid that is trying to get into college baseball or get into professional baseball. A lot of grunting and huffing and puffing. It's pretty interesting. It's like really cool to look at because it's just so much different than like what I do. But I just hope that like they can then make that transition to, okay, now it's like real baseball and it's competitive and it's time to get guys out.
So we've had two different mindsets on here where we've had Mike Clevenger this week said, velo is everything. You don't throw hard. The game's going to leave you behind. Amir Garrett followed up and said, velo is everything and you'll stick around longer. And then we've had Leo Mazzoni on who said, velo is nothing. It's all about movement, hitting your spots, a whole bunch of other things before velo. He never even heard of velo when he was coaching Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz. Where do you stand on that in that spectrum? Obviously, it's not an either or. I mean, you can have velo and hit your spots.
Yeah, I'd say like a little combination of both. My personal pitching approach, I'm not very like hitting spots oriented. I'm not a command pitcher. I know what I have and I try to use it to the best of my ability. I'm all about challenging hitters. Like you'd probably be surprised if you were to watch a start of mine, like, let's say like 110 pitch start, how many pitches I'm actually trying to throw right down the middle. So it's kind of hard for me to say, oh yeah, it's all about like, hitting your spots and movement. Like I don't really rely on movement. I throw a straight fastball and I throw a pretty straight changeup.
Your changeup's nasty though. Don't lie. I mean, that's a really
pitch. It's a good pitch for me. The big thing is just taking the velocity off. Like if I'm throwing my fastball in like the 94, 95 range, I'm throwing my changeup in like the 79 to 81 range, then I know that I'm going to be at a pretty big advantage because the hitter has to guess at that point. The velocity difference is too much to make an adjustment, really. So yeah, I try to take advantage of that, take advantage of like the tools I know I have. And I focus less on command, more about throwing, just pouring it in the zone, throwing strikes. And then, once I have that 0-2 count or 1-2 count, okay, now we can try and expand the zone and hit a spot. So, I can't sit here and say, oh, screw velocity. It's about movement and location when I don't even like treat pitching like that. So yeah, I think velocity is very important. It makes your job easier. I can't sit here and say that in 2018, when I was throwing sinkers and I was throwing like 91 to 93, compare that to what I was doing last year in 2019, throwing a four-seamer. So it's not moving as much. And then, but throwing it like 94 to 96, it was easier to throw it to pitch in the big leagues at 94 to 96 than 91 93. I also didn't have a great sinker, and that's why I stopped throwing it. But yeah, I'd say my answer is probably like, yes, velocity is very important, but I like to have that emphasis on pitching. Like it is it's a very, very difficult task. And it's something that you need to work on forever until you retire. Don't just be content because like, oh, I have 100 mile an hour fastball. Like I got this. Like yes, it's good to have that confidence, but you go out there and have that good mindset to execute pitches.
Josh, before switching, I'm just curious on the changeup grip. I know you've showed it before. Are you doing anything other than just throwing a straight change? What are your thought process on your changeup since it's so good?
Yeah, it's a circle changeup, pretty standard like two-seam circle changeup. So where like you have your middle finger and ring finger on the seams.
Rob needs you to get a ball right now. Just go get a ball and show us.
Oh yeah,
I
could do that. I think I have a baseball in the other room.
Rob, just tell him. Just say I want a ball. Show me the ball. That's what the viewers want at home. I love it.
So it's like the most typical standard. The lighting is not good. Hold on.
He's on board with us, Rob. He's gonna make sure the lighting's good. He's all on board with this.
Yeah, he's a professional. We're just
let's not turn on.
I love it.
All right, so changeup is like your standard, typical two-seam circle changeup. I have it. I wouldn't say necessarily like deep in my hand, like my palm, but it's like all the way in the back of my fingers. And it's touching my palm. It's like touching. Dang, I should have done this on my computer so I could have both hands. It's okay.
Yeah,
so like it's touching like the top of my hand, the top of my palm, right?
Like where your calluses are. Is that what
yeah, like pretty much where the calluses are. That's where it rests. Thought process with throwing it. I do not think about pronating ever. That will just screw me up. I'm never like, oh, like try and throw it like this. There's none of that. That's like the Luis Castillo style changeup, which is disgusting, but a different kind of changeup than mine. Strasburg throws that one too, where it's like that sideways spinner. Yeah, that's like the kind of, when I watch it, like that nasty changeup, it gets swings and misses, not because of velo difference, but because of like super late fade and break. Mine, I can throw it like a certain way where it's like just dead straight like my heater, or I can kind of like finish it a little bit and get a little bit of that fade. But the basic thought process is like I'm throwing a fastball. Arm speed, huge, being behind the ball with both of my fingers, and then just like letting it come off my middle finger because that's the longest one. So
when you're saying you're finishing it, though, that's your natural pronation. Your arm will
yeah,
fit.
yeah. Like obviously everyone's arm pronates after you release the ball. So like I'm not thinking about pronating because then I'm going to start to lose that feel around the zone. For me, my changeup, I trust throwing that for a strike sometimes more than my fastball, depending on the day. So,
You know, the ones that fade get more on my page than the ones that are straight changeups.
yeah, just because it's pretty to look at.
Yeah, that's literally the only reason.
Yeah, so like big thing is like another thing, kind of technology, looking at the Rapsodo numbers, Rapsodo pitch effects, whatever. My changeup, depending on how I release it, like it will have a ride to it. So it'll be like my fastball, it will have that like vertical carry, which most pitching minds like look at that data and be like, oh, you don't want your changeup to do that. I actually do want my changeup to do that sometimes because it makes it look more like my four-seam fastball. And so, let's say a guy's in a 2-0 count, he's looking heater, and I throw a pitch that looks identical to the heater, but it's 12 miles an hour slower. It's like most likely going to be a swing and miss or like off the end of the bat. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of have like a different approach to it that, has been working for me, and I'm just going to continue to roll with that.
That's a fascinating point because everybody looks at your changeup's got to be down and away. Your changeup's got to be down and away. I've seen pitchers not only with changeups throw them high and be effective because of change of speeds, but also breaking stuff. You can throw it up in the zone too.
Yeah, they say the best pitch in baseball is that hanging slider, like up and in on a righty, the backup, just because like it's the movement is so weird that it will like catch hitters off guard. I had a couple strikeouts with that pitch last year, obviously by accident. You're not trying to hang a slider up, but it'll work out every once in a while. Yeah, my changeup, like I kind of touched on earlier, like I'm trying to throw a lot of pitches down the middle. I'm trying to keep the pitch count down, try to stay in, just pitch in the zone. Like I want to fill up the zone. I want to get ahead, have a nice pace. So a lot of changeups I'm trying to throw down the middle. Some of them will end up in the zone, but when my fastball's up in the zone, it'll work to my advantage. Generally, you don't want to I'm not trying to live up in the zone my changeup because those pitches will get smacked. If the guy guesses right and he recognizes it and sees it up in the zone, like that thing's 700 feet. So there's times and places for it for sure.
For the younger guy, is the key to developing a good changeup? Is it more about getting the fastball velocity up and then going into learning the changeup, or doesn't matter what the fastball velocity is, you could still learn a very effective changeup?
Yeah, I don't think that it matters at all what your fastball velo is. For me, like I have no idea why my changeup's so slow. I don't feel like I do anything weird or different as far as like my grip or my release. But that's just kind of how it developed and worked out for me. And so I'm trying to use that to my advantage. That's like the main question I get from like younger players is like, how do I slow my changeup down? I throw 92, I throw 95, I throw 99. When my changeup is only a few miles an hour off. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If you can continue to develop it in a way that you can make it like break a lot, make it fade down and away a lot, then having a firm changeup is not necessarily a bad thing. But I really think that the biggest factor in developing a changeup is just throwing with that grip, getting used to that grip, throwing the ball with like all of your fingers on it, having that changeup grip just as comfortable as when you throw it with like that typical forcing grip that you play catch with. I played catch with my changeup grip a lot, like post Tommy John. And, you know, coming up through the minor leagues. And that's how I think it became such an effective pitch for me.
You've mentioned a couple times that you work with high schoolers, you get a lot of questions from young guys. So you're obviously very involved there. What is another one of the more common questions that young guys come to you with that you give advice on?
I get the changeup one a lot. I'm thinking, I get, how do I build velocity? That's a typical one.
What's one how about this? What's something that you feel like the younger guys don't ask you that they should be asking you about?
You got some arm care routines for me? You got, what do you got for me to strengthen my scap, subscap, rotator cuff muscles, all that good stuff. I really think that all of these arm injuries, I don't think that they can all be avoided. I think that Tommy Johns are going to continue to happen. That's just kind of part of baseball now. But I think that certain ones can be avoided if players start to learn about that stuff at a younger age and really get involved in it. Weightlifting is great. I was in the gym since I was 14, love weightlifting, but there's some smaller muscles in there that are very important to keep strong and keep stable as well.
So you had mentioned Alan Jaeger, who I'm good friends with. Have you done any of his mental game stuff? How big is the mental game for you?
It's huge. That when people talk about all the changes I made from 18 to 19 and becoming a successful pitcher, they like to talk about changing my arm action and this and that. But by far the number one most important thing I did was fix what was going on up there. I was pitching in 18 with a lot of anxiety. I'd put a lot of pressure on myself. I'd have starts where I'd like walk the first batter of the game, give up a hit, and then I feel like the walls are caving in around me. And that's not something that should ever happen. When you're out there and you have the ball and you're pitching in a big league baseball game, like, you have to have all the confidence in the world if you're going to get through it. And then you have to go and do it, a few days later, over and over. So that was the most important thing that I had to make sure I got right going to the next season. I love Alan's stuff. Been doing Alan's stuff since I was a kid. The breathing, yoga, meditation, it's all wonderful. Another big thing is visualization. I think visualization is hugely important. I do it in a number of different ways. I've done it through the neurofeedback training program I'm involved in, which, I started that before the 19th season. I still do that stuff. Visualization, like as I do scouting reports, interesting way I do that is playing MLB The Show. Play MLB The Show as myself, pitching against the team I will be pitching against in real life the next day, doing my scouting report, taking my notes, applying that scouting report to the video game, and then seeing my video game self being successful the day before I go and pitch in a game. It sounds kind of weird and it's definitely nerdy, which I am.
No, I don't think so at all.
I think that's fantastic for all the parents who say video games are bad.
Well, colleges and NFL teams are now giving playbooks to their quarterbacks coming out of college. That's how they're learning playbooks, is through Madden.
Yeah. I think Madden's a great tool for learning playbooks. We have the White Sox. We have like these like hitting tools now, like they're it's like virtual reality put on the headset, and like you literally can select any pitcher in the big leagues and you see like them throwing the ball, and then like they use all of that data collection to kind of project an image of how fast the ball is, how that pitcher's ball moves. And there's like little games you play where you like recognize pitches and like where the pitch was in the strike zone when it crossed home plate. So yeah, I mean, huge in baseball now. And yeah, I try to take advantage of it any way I can, even if it means I'm playing the baseball video game.
Yeah, crazy idea. Maybe a professional team should take some of that money and put it into lower income communities, you know? Maybe that's a better use. Just saying, since we're on the topic. But I got another question
Yeah, I
for
think
you.
that'd be
Uh,
great.
I got a better question for you. I'm seeing it a lot right now, and I think this could be really good advice to the kids going into playing summer ball. With quarantine that just happened, a lot of these kids have been on the hill inside playing, you know, throwing bullpens, right? Nothing live, no batters even standing in at a lot of these facilities. And now they're going to go out there, right? And they're going to deal with some of that competitive anxiety. And these teenagers, they don't necessarily have the breathing skills or the meditation training that you have, and you know the things available to you with the big leagues. So would you have any advice to some of these younger guys that don't have those tools available to them on how to avoid that competitive anxiety, or at least lower it?
Yeah. You know, simple breathing exercises like close your eyes and you know, deep breath, like 4 count in, 4 count out. You know, you can visualize like kind of going up a ladder, like stepping up steps, and you want to like bring it up to 10 and then down to 0, or you know, whatever number you choose, 5, 8, doesn't matter. That's super simple, basic, like meditative breathing that will like lower all of those like negative feelings, anxiety. And then you take a step further. You mix that breathing in with visualization. So like if you're starting a game, for instance, as a pitcher, you know, all the senses, sight, you know, what are you seeing running out to the mound? Sounds, like, you know, how big is the crowd? What kind of noise are your teammates talking to you, whatever. Even, you know, smell, feel, like, you know, how does the ball feel in your hand, the glove on your other hand, like putting yourself into the game situation in your mind. And then the biggest part is when the game starts and you're pitching, even though it's in your brain, you're just dominating. It's easy, like that kind of like peak performance, like you're playing a video game, but it's real life. I know every athlete experiences that, you know, at least a couple times, few times. It's that like peak performance mode. If you visualize that, you're going to start to see it happening more often. And so, you know, that's just like kind of like my basic advice. Any kid could get into that immediately. You don't have to have any training or any special program for that.
I do that every morning on Twitter before I get on.
Yeah.
So one quick thing, we talked about your mechanics change, and I know that you use the core velocity belt a little bit. You mentioned weighted balls. What precipitated the mechanics change, and what were some key takeaways that you had of what you changed from what you were doing? I see it visually, but what does it feel like to you?
Basically, it was like 2 parts. I was super not on time. My arm was very, very late. So by the time my left foot would hit the ground, like in my delivery, my right arm would be like super late, like down here. Not ideal, not where you want to be. It's harder to be consistent. You're putting yourself in more risk for injury, like a bunch of bad stuff. That was clear as day, like watching video. So one of the things, like, how do we get my arm to be on time? I'm the type of guy where like I take the ball out of my glove pretty late in my delivery. And when I take it out early, it feels super weird. And it's just like, you know, I could try and make that adjustment, you know, try and just take the ball out earlier, get my arm going earlier. But after so many years of like doing it a certain way, like it would feel just so different and so strange. it's like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like having like one motion of like what your arm's doing while like your hips and your legs and everything else is like doing another motion at the same time. If they're synced up a certain way for so long, it's hard to change that. So kind of decided on, well, I don't want to like take my, I don't want to like take the ball out earlier and try to make that adjustment. So why don't we just shorten the arm action altogether? I don't have to worry about like the timing of anything. I just do what feels natural, but my arm is just going to be shorter, like quicker up to the ear, essentially. So we got to work on that. That was definitely with the help of the Plyo care balls, like the Driveline program. Forget what the exercise is called, like reverse throws, pivot picks, that kind of stuff. Honestly, it started with like throwing like one of those heavy ones. When I did it with the long arm action, it hurt. I threw the ball. I was like, oh God, that felt terrible. And then when I shortened up and I thought like, okay, be more athletic, kind of be like a shortstop, middle infielder type, it felt good. It was like, okay, that felt good throwing this ball against the wall. So just stuck with that. And then once I picked up a baseball, kind of the same process, same thought process, like be short, be quick, be athletic, you know, let my legs kind of guide me in the direction I want to go, and just, you know, fire the ball quick. And I wasn't really planning on like making my arm super short. I just wanted to clean some stuff up, but it felt really, really good. Like I could tell the ball was just coming out of my hand the way I wanted it to, right in the beginning of the throwing program. So we pretty much just stuck with that. You know, I've kind of tapered off using the Plyo care balls as much as I was, just because they do have that ability to increase external rotation in your shoulder a lot. And I already have a lot of external rotation, so I don't want to go crazy with it. But super helpful tool for kind of cleaning up my timing of my arm action. And then the core velocity belt, I love that thing. That was pretty much figuring out how to get into my legs better and start driving down the mound instead of like falling down the mound. I was at a point where my like lower half mechanics were so messed up. I was like, you know, lifting my left leg out of the windup, like lifting the left leg and then kind of swinging gate open, falling down, landing on my heel super hard, a lot of recoil in my throwing. Yeah. So I was kind of, that's like where my mechanics were at that point. It was a mess. And putting on the core velo belt immediately gave me that like kinesthetic feel I was looking for, of like, oh, so like that's how you get into your right glute. That's how you like drive down the mound. You know, I've had coaches telling me for years, you know, like load into that back hip and drive down the mound. I just could never equate like seeing it on video, hearing it from a coach, to like actually feeling it myself. And the core velocity belt, like as soon as I put that thing on, it was like, oh, okay, like that's what I'm supposed to feel. And so, you know, that's another tool that I use to this day. Kind of expanded the amount of stuff I do with it. Like in the very beginning, I was pretty much just doing dry mechanics. So like one of the cords kind of pulling me and getting my hip into the position I wanted it to. But now I use it for a lot of different things. So yeah, it's pretty much like the origin story, I guess.
Rob, do you have any final thoughts before I ask him one last question?
I mean, we could talk forever on that stuff, but I don't want to take up all your whole day. Maybe we could do this again at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Last question for you. A kid comes up to you at the age of 14, 15 years old, and he says, you're an MLB All-Star. How do I become an MLB All-Star? What's the short answer on that?
short answer is you gotta love the game. You got to love the pursuit of excellence, like, and you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself. Obviously you have to have the ability, you have to have the skills, like that. You don't have to talk about that. If you do have those skills, like, it takes a lot more than that, a lot more. To get up to the big leagues is difficult. To stay in the big leagues is supremely difficult. And then to play at an extremely high level is, like, the hardest thing. And, for me, like, I want to do it for years and years and years. Have a lot of personal success, have a lot of team success. The work never stops, and you have to have an open mind. Be open to, trying out new things, different things. That's pretty much like the story of my, like, career comeback is being comfortable with putting myself in an uncomfortable spot. Like, I wasn't having success, but I was, like, comfortable with the way that I trained. I was comfortable with the way that I threw. Like, it felt okay. But I knew that if I was going to, like, reach my true potential, that I have to open up my mind and I have to try weird stuff. I'd have to try different stuff. And so I'd say be open to that, and always be on that pursuit of excellence. There's always something that you can improve, always something that, you can get a little bit better on each given day.
I think you offered up some great advice that will help guys here today, and that's what this is all about. So thank you very much. Good luck this season, man. Hopefully there is a season and we get out there soon. And like Rob said, hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks.